Nina, can you hear us? Hey Nina, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi Nina, can you hear us?
Yes, hello.
Excellent, thank you.
Canadian time.
We're a bit on Indian time here, so we're just waiting for one more person. To the live audience, we are running on Indian time, so we're a couple minutes behind here.
Really? I took 2 Benadryl. I went home, ate some Benadryl.
Welcome, everyone. Hi. I believe we're going to start off with a prayer. Dwayne's going to lead a song.
My name is Dwayne. I just wanted to sing an encouragement song for everybody here. I just love everybody who speaks.
I'm going to start us off with a little introduction, and then we'll introduce our panelists. We are here to educate, not to forgive. We are here to enlighten, not to accuse. That's a quote from Willie Johns of the Brighton Seminole Reservation in Florida. The history of the United States is a story of settler colonialism. It is a country founded on slavery and genocide. There is no upbeat ending. You cannot look at this history and find a way to spin it into positivity. It is a history without redemption or reconciliation. Today in the United States, there are more than 500 federally recognized indigenous nations comprising nearly 3 million people, descendants of the 15 million native people who once inhabited this land. The centuries-long genocidal program of the US settler colonial regimen has largely been omitted from our history books. We are here, in part, to recognize the founding myth of the United States and show how policy against the indigenous people was colonialist and designed to seize the territories of the original inhabitants, displacing or eliminating them. This policy was not only enacted, but it was praised and adopted in popular culture through writers like James Fenimore Cooper and Walt Whitman, and in the highest offices of government and the military. Shockingly, as the genocidal policy reached its zenith under President Andrew Jackson, its ruthlessness was best articulated by U.S. Army General Thompson S. Jessup, who in 1836 wrote of the Seminoles, "The country can be rid of them only by exterminating them." To quote a recent New York Times article, "The national park system has long been lauded as America's greatest idea, but only relatively recently has it begun to be more deeply questioned." In his 1999 book, Dispossessing the Wilderness, Indian Removal and Making of the National Parks, Mark David Spence delivered a long overdue critique that linked the creation of the first national parks with the federal policy of Indian removal. Spence points out that the first so-called wilderness areas that had been deemed in need of preserving were not only, and in actuality, indigenous occupied landscapes when the first national parks were established, but also that an uninhabited wilderness had to first be created. Today, as the world shrivels under climate change, Native communities are gathering to protect the lands that have been destroyed and taken. Our goals may vary, but it is clear that our commitments to protecting our water, lands, and people are paramount to the work that we do. We have gathered a panel of incredibly passionate people who have taken a variety of roles across the Americas to offer support, leadership, and guidance in these times.
Thank you, Shane. That was incredible. Shane, Creeping Bear, everyone. Ani Buzu, that means the light inside of me is the same as the light inside of you. And hello, greetings. I'm Jennifer Knickerbocker. I come from the Anishinaabe people from White Earth Nation, and I'm really pleased to be here. I work at Antioch College. I am the Director of Foundation and Corporate Relations, and I just want to acknowledge that Antioch College has been really supportive and has given us this platform and given us this space to talk about these really important issues. And we're in the process of re-indigenizing this land. We are on stolen land, and we need to recognize that. I'm going to go down the line and introduce you to each one of you who joined us here today. Sitting here to the right of me is Corinne Fairbanks. She's a writer, educator, and activist, a spokesperson for Native American rights. Corinne is currently one of the lead organizers in the American Indian movement of southwestern Ohio. She is a leader of WARN, Women of All Red Nations. She was formerly the director of the American Indian movement of Southern California. Welcome, Corinne. Next to Corinne is Jerry Neri. He has worked in the past with organizations such as the Miami Valley Native American Council, the Southern Ohio Archdiocese of the Episcopal Church, the Native American Ministry Council, Poor People's Campaign, and Sierra Club. He is directly active in Standing Rock and the co-founder of the Greater Cincinnati Native American Coalition, which abolished Columbus Day in Cincinnati and replaced with Indigenous Peoples Day. And he's currently the project director for GCNAC. Yes, thank you, Jerry. Next to Jerry is Guy Jones. He's Lakota and a full-blood member of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. He's one of the founders of the Miami Valley Council for Native Americans in Dayton, Ohio. and has served as an advisor for the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History, the Minority Arts Task Force of the Ohio Arts Council, and the Greater Dayton Christian Race Relations Task Force, and a Bias Review Council of the Ohio Department of Education. Welcome, Guy. Next to Guy is Dwayne Redwater, who gave us our opening song, which was beautiful. Buzu is a Lakota Dakota from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and describes himself as a humble man. He brought his spirit of the drum to Tijuana, the Butterfly Center in Texas, and its Standing Rock. Welcome, Dwayne. And on the end of our panel is Errol Medicine, who belongs to the Lakota Dakota people and is a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. He recently helped build a network of Indigenous-led relatives supporting asylum seekers and Indigenous communities along the U.S.-Mexico border. Welcome, Errol. So today we want to have an interactive experience. This is live streaming on YouTube. So to our YouTube guests, hello. I will be reading some questions that come in, but we also just kind of want to start to talk about what is water protection. So I'd like to go down and see if we can have a conversation about what that means. And as soon as questions start coming in, we'll just open it up and we'll just let this conversation flow. Okay. Corinne. I mean to put you on the spot, but
So the question is, what is water protection?
yeah, water protection.
I think this is payback, because the last panel I was on, when we had a group of questions and nothing went as well, so everything I prepared doesn't really matter now. So it's, what is water protection? I think for me, water protection means water's always been a symbol of, has always been a feminine symbol. It's always been seen as a life giver that's constant and nurturing, not only to the inhabitants that's in it, but also the inhabitants on land, and the interconnected networking and interrelationships between both of that. And of course, it's also related to the moon. Water is very involved with the relationship of the moon, and again, that has everything to do with women. So I don't think you can take water, the issues of water, without taking into account its human rights value and how they are metaphorically and also physically connected. And also, sometimes when we talk about water, we only think about one body of water and not necessarily all bodies of water, which is kind of like with my experience being on the West Coast and working with California Native tribes there. Predominantly, the issues were on what was going on in the ocean, and not just with the fracking and the offshore drilling, but also the oil spills that happen there. What a lot of people don't know is that sometimes the way water works and how it's worked historically is that there were many village sites and actually sacred sites that were submerged that were also endangered of being lost. When we talk about water rights, we also talk about seismic testing or sonar testing and the blasting of all the marine life there. There's just so many aspects of the issues of water, but it's not just the water itself, but how we're all connected to the water, how we're all connected to ecologically, physically, and spiritually connected to each other.
As my relative Corinne here was saying, I agree with her, and people talk about water protection and water protectors, and as non-Indigenous people have come into the movement, and non-Indigenous people have started helping out with their allyship, water protection has always been there since the 70s when I was a kid. The water has always been an important part of indigenous communities, whether it was in California or Arizona, especially in New Mexico, Four Corners area with the uranium mines, and so there has always been an issue with water, and there has always been those people that are trying to protect the water. I didn't come into this to be an activist. One day someone called me that, it's just what we do because it's all we have, whether it's the Ohio River and UNESCO, and trying to relax the environmental protection laws on the Ohio River so they can put pipelines and cracker plants along the Ohio, or whether it's on Cannonball and in Standing Rock. Water from the very beginning, when you're in the womb, water is literally life. That is the only place where water comes from nothing, is in the womb. And like my relative Corinne was saying, that is so much a part of that feminine, a part of Mother Earth, and a part of protecting not just the water in one area, but all waters, because that's what links us. Those waters connect us in that way.
So, what was the question again? What does water protection mean to me? Well, I mean, it's kind of not really. It's kind of our jobs as Indigenous people to, be the landlords and caretakers that we once were. Whenever they came, they taught them how to grow corn, and they turned it on them. Where people think that we're a really mad, pissed off Indian, but we're not. We're still willing to show you guys the way. It's kind of our jobs. It's I don't know how to say it. It's kind of what we can do give back to Mother Earth. She gave us life, so we can at least do that for her. Protect the water and whatever else gives us life. This is my first time doing this, so excuse me, guys. But I'm not much of a talker, so I'll just let my leg sheet talk.
What he's saying is, I'm the talker. I'm a Dakiapi. I'd like to welcome each and every one of my relatives here. When I say by relatives, I mean by relatives. We all have one God, one Creator. We're all going to go to the same place. All exception to me, I'm going to hell, so I'm going to need all the water I need. But in reality, what does the water protector mean to me? As an Indigenous person, water is our first medicine. And it's kind of ironic that my last name is Medicine. A lot of people always say, oh, he's a medicine man. Well, it's because I'm a man and I'm medicine. Don't make me a medicine man. What it does make me is it makes me somebody that wants to get out there and make our people, my relatives, understand. Like when they talked about us going down south to help our Indigenous relatives in the south. Now, they're fleeing for their lives because of what the number 45 has done to them. Now, I will not even call him my president of the United States because he's not. And when we go back into, even though I've served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps, I didn't fight for the country, I fought for our country, our land, our rights, our freedom. And to have the freedom to have the choice to understand where we are from and who we are. It's like we all come from water, every one of us. None of us was born without water. None of us. We all need water to survive. Not one of us can go without water. And our Lakota ways, the way we believe is we go up on the hill for 4 days and 4 nights and we fast. And we go without the things that are needed, and so that way you know what you need when you go up there. And and you're praying, you feel that. You want the water, you want the food. You know the nourishment of what it is to have nourishment. And when I look back at being a water protector, they say, I'm not a water protector. I'm just a relative that came here. And when we're born in water, all of us males in here, we were all women at one time. Every one of us. We come from a woman. For the first 28 weeks of our lives, we are a woman. Until we've decided to become a protector, a man. That's what a man is, a protector. He protects Mother Earth, he protects his wife, he protects his children. He protects everything that's within. And so at those times, in our times, we've decided as men to do these things. And to be this way, and to be a protector. So it doesn't mean that we're always really perfect. We're this gentleman here, sitting here, he's a water protector. He came. He protects the water we live in. And that's ironic that we're here in Yellow Springs. When I first came here, I met a man down in Tijuana. And his name was Matthew Morgan. I didn't know him from Adam, nor did I care who he was. What I met him was how his heart. He was a loving, kind, still is, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sorry that he couldn't be here today, but, you know, he reached out and he helped these people. All people. He didn't see they were black, yellow, red, no. That's all he knew is they were his relatives. And we looked upon this and we said, okay, we worked together. We went together, we worked, not because we were water protectors or we're activists, because we were relatives. We understood that we were relatives. That God created each and every one of us, and all of us don't believe, some of us don't believe there is a God, or we believe that there is no higher power. But when it comes down to it, if you're a scientist and believe there's something, you find that there is a greater force, or something that you believe that everybody has this right. It's like how we do daylight saving time. We cut the top of the blanket off and we sew it on the bottom. Come springtime, we cut it off, put it on the top. Still the same blanket, right? Still the same God. So with these things that I have in my heart, I can't say for nobody else. You know? That I believe that water here in Yellow Springs, or Tecumseh, was gather all of the nations of all of, I don't believe just the natives. I believe he was supposed to gather all of the nations. And to protect this water, this mini Wachoni. We got to go up there yesterday and really see the springs where it comes from. And you see my son come up here. First thing he took a drink of it, he said, it tastes like rocks or something. He said, it tastes like rocks. I looked at him when I started laughing because that's minerals. That's pure water. That's the real thing, you know? And that's what it is when you get the real thing. You don't get what's in the tap. You don't get the chlorine and all that. Filtering and all that stuff. You got the real deal there, you know? So it was kind of heart-touching to me, you know, so I kind of, you know, sat there for a little bit, brought back tears, you know, and I thought, you know what, Tecumseh, when I was here the last time, he talked to me, you know, he'd go, oh, he talked to you, how's that? Oh, no, he just does, you know, it's like God, he talks to us, you know? So he talked to me, and I talked to him a little bit, and, you know, I said, hey, Creator, you know, I think I know why you put us here, you know. I think you got to reach out tomorrow in this panel, and I got to tell these guys, every one of us, you know. Let's all just look to the left and all let's look to the right. You know what? We ain't no difference. We ain't no difference. Each and every one of us have three-fourths of us has water. You know? No matter how big or small you are, your body still has 3/4 is water. what we're standing on, and we're sitting on, Mother Earth, she's the same way. You know? And so, when we see the flooding and the water that's going on and the stuff that's devastating to the earth, that's Mother Earth trying to cleanse herself, trying to get herself back to normal, because ain't nobody helping her. I looked at the college when I first got here and I took a picture of it, the dormitory. They have all of these recyclable bins, you know? And I thought, hey, you know, we gotta do this as Indian people back home, because we're supposed to be the caretakers of this place. You know? I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Native Americans, but back home, we all live in a place called HUD housing. On the contrary belief, like some of you think, we still live in teepees, chase the buffalo. We live in HUD housing and it's all the same. And we're mandated by the United States government how to live there. Now, in HUD housing, we can mandate it so that they have to recycle. Because, you know, our leadership, I can only speak for my leadership, but we only have 2 people in Standing Rock with a 2-year degree. In modern day America, you look at a place that has deals with millions of dollars, they have the master's or doctorate degrees to be sitting on there. We look at our own land, and we got people that have less than a 2-year degree dealing with millions of dollars, and then you wonder why we are like we are. You know? Because we don't have the education to come up. The education level that we have is not as great, or could be better than what they say we get. The government every year takes money from us. The government takes money from us that they promised us. And my nephew here said, we're not radical. We just want what's ours. You know? My great grandfather, Little Crow, one day did the uprising. The agent said to my grandfather, for all I care, let you eat grass. You know? The next day they found that gentleman with his mouth full of grass. That was my grandfather. So I always think, you know what? It could be like that. But I don't, because there's always another alternative. There's a different way to live. And that's to understand that God has a plan for each and every one of us. And we have to live in harmony to make this water work for us. Without water, there's no life. And that's how we say in Lakota, Mini Wachoni, water of life. And that's what it is. You know, either there is no water, there's no food. And if that president builds that wall, you know, the butterflies are all disappearing and the bees all disappear, you know what happens? No food. No food, no water. And about down the line, we're all going to be dead. We're allowing him to do that to us. And that's not right. You know? I feel that we as people have to come together in the terminology to understand that we need a brighter, you know, brighter future with all of the people in it. And that's what makes it, every one of us become a water protector then. You know? You don't have to stand up and say, me and my Tony or whatever, do your part. You know? Do your part to be a relative. And so with that, I'm going to give it to my Tahashi. This means my blood relative. He's from the same home. Me and my nephew are from Guy Jones. Aho, Pilamia, Aichituro.
I wasn't going to say nothing. No, I was just letting it go. I mean, you know, it's you all seen in the little bio. My name is Guy Jones. That's a really good Lakota name. And it is, because it's mine. You know, and it's a name that my parents gave me. My grandfather's Pezi, is Gaul. And a lot of them credit him for being the leader that led the front charge against General George Armstrong Custer at Greasy Grass, the little big one. That's my grandfather. But I always tell people that I'm Hunkpapa Lakota. Hunkpapa is my responsibility. Lakota is my language. In your history books, you are taught to call my people Sioux. And that is one of the things that even today, there's a certain amount of terminology and perceptions. And even as we go about our lives, one of the things that, like even everybody's, water protector. I always see that. I was up in Pennsylvania, Penn State, and I saw this young lady with a tattoo. And I recognized it. And she said she was a water protector. And I said, you always have been. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. You don't have to put a label or a marking on you. I'm not an activist. I'm not a water protector. When I came into this world, I had a responsibility. And it's that responsibility that I, as a male, I, as a father, these are my responsibilities. As an uncle, as a relative, these are my responsibilities. And how that all goes and how that all continues. To look at creation and to understand our surroundings is vital. To understand that in this world, there's a duality. And to understand that complexity and what exactly that means. To understand that duality. I have a very unique history. And I was raised in a lot of traditions, in various traditions, and I looked at those traditions. In a couple months, my relative, Orville Lookenhorst, the keeper of the White Buffalo Calf Bundle, he will be here with us at the 24th Annual World Peace and Prayer Day in Fort Ancient. But also to working with these various communities, I go back to a time to remember my uncle, Harold Jones, who is the first American Indian suffragan bishop of the Episcopal Church. That's my tradition. That's my experience. I look at that. And I understand those teachings because they are teachings. Like Earl was saying about what our responsibility is. And one of the things is that I don't have an education, not like a lot of people think. I lectured at a number of colleges and universities across this nation. I've written a book. I wrote a book because somebody with a degree told my son that he was wrong. So I wrote a book. Because that's what it takes in this world. So I wrote a book in somebody else's language. And I took my perception and translated it into their terminology to explain to them why my son was not wrong. And that is one of the things that today we live in those times. Who's right and who's wrong? When we sit back and we look, and that's just like one of the things is that when I was talking to this young lady up in Pennsylvania about, she was very proud to be a water protector, she said. And she told me about her experience. And that's good. It's good. I'm glad you were there. Now, do you understand? Because you see, us three were relatives. And how that all began was these young girls said enough. And they went to their grandmas and they asked. And that's how that movement began, was by reclaiming their responsibilities. They didn't have to talk about all of these and utilize terminology and labels. You didn't have these young girls out there talking about their warriors or their feminists. They accepted their responsibility as to who they were. And because they saw something, they saw a future, and that future contained their grandchildren. And that's why we have a responsibility to take care of our grandchildren's future. That's what a water protector is to me.
Is Nina on the call with us? Is this?
Hello? Yes.
Hi, hello. Do you have a response for what being a water protector means for you?
Yeah. So I just want to say, Hamada Kiapi, when I see Tawachi boy him, yeah, now I see two, I mean, the Berk Hamachiapi, Malakota Nashaki Aloni, hello everyone. I am known to the spirits as Northern Lights Woman. I am Northern Cheyenne and Oglala Lakota, and I currently reside in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I guess I'm 19 years old. I've only been doing this work for a couple years, but it's going on my entire life, following all the way back to my ancestors. Water protector is something that I live as every single day since the time I was born. Each and every single one of us have that responsibility. I'd like to echo what all those who talked before me echo that we all hold the responsibility to not only honor those who came before us doing this work, but those who will continue on after us. Because when I go out and I tell people that we need to start caring for our water, I don't do it for myself, my family, those who are living today. I think 7 generations ahead. And as being young people, it's our job to undo and to work for our future generations and undo that hurt, that trauma, and to heal from it. Because everybody wants their face and their name everywhere, but nobody wants to do the hard work. Nobody wants to talk about the hard things. So we want to go and we want to see that happiness and see everyone flourish in a happy way, but we need to start addressing these history that comes with this. Why are people struggling today? Why is there young kids who will grow up and not know what it is to have clean water? It's because we're facing dark history that comes with that oppression and that hurt that we're still feeling. And so when I say, I'm not just a water protector. I'm a human being. I'm a young person. I am a young Oglala Lakota woman. And it is my job to speak for not only the land and the water, but for my great-great-grandchildren. Because what are they going to have? What's going to be left for them? I think that every single day to myself, what am I going to do today that'll benefit my great-grandchildren, my great-great-great-grandchildren? Because I know that if I look 7 generations back, my ancestor was thinking that very exact same thing. They say, what can I do today that'll help benefit my great-grandchildren? That's why we're all able to be here today. It's because our ancestors never gave up. They never came up with an excuse not to fight. Because every single day, they were struggling to keep our traditions alive, to keep our language alive, and to make sure that we're able to drink clean water, that we're able to hunt and eat our food. Today, we have to worry about the contaminants inside of our water. We have to worry about oil pipelines going through the cleanest of water. In Minnesota right now, we're dealing with the Line 3 pipeline proposed by the Enbridge Corporation. And back in June of 2018, they approved that pipeline. And so now we're feeling the repercussions because they're going to start drilling, and they're going to start building it within this next year or so. Because they don't care enough about the future generations. They care more about the dollars that are going inside of their pockets than they do about my great-great-grandchildren. And so it's a struggle for survival. It's not just to put a happy label on things and look at it in a happy way. There's definitely beauty, and there's passion, and there's all the great things, but there needs to be that duality. You can't look at the good without addressing the bad. You can't look at the bad without addressing the good. And so when I stand up and I say, I care so much about my future generations that I refuse to let these pipelines go through. I refuse to see them contaminate the beautiful waters here in northern Minnesota. That my ancestors were willing to say that it's a good day to die, and I should be able to say that same thing. That's the reality we live in. That's the reality we face every single day. That's what I have to deal with as a young Lakota Northern Cheyenne woman. That's who I am. I'm standing up. Us people, call us water protectors or whatever you will. We are just carrying on the work of our ancestors. And that's what every single one of us should be doing. Thank you.
Something that stood out to me is caretakers of the planet, something that both Guy and Errol mentioned. It made me think of a book I read called The Indigenous People's History of the United States, written by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And it goes on quite a bit to describe sort of settler descriptions of the land they encountered as they expanded westward. And this land was ornately kept, you know, from coast to coast. There were people taking care of the land, the forests, the prairies, the water. And that's something that we do not have in the United States as a people. It's not a priority. As Nina mentioned, all of this is very closely tied to capital. I'm leading into talking about environmental racism. This is a term that comes up quite a bit when we're discussing these topics. And I'm wondering if I could ask one or two of our panelists to describe this for our guests.
I think that, well, first I actually failed to take the opportunity to thank Antioch College for having this panel and having this discussion. And I certainly am grateful and honored to be part of this esteemed panel. I also wanted to thank the ancestors of this land for allowing me to be a guest here. And I think that when we're talking about water protection and environmental racism and land protection, we also have to remember how this country was stolen, how it was colonized, the imperialism involved with that. Because that's still a driving force. When we talk about capitalism and imperialism and big money and corporation, you know, and the corporations, they put money on human bodies. They put money on that. They've decided that humanity is expendable. And they decided that animal life, marine life, is expendable as well. You know, and I think that that is something that has stayed true to form since 1492, since the beginning of when they stepped foot, you know, on this continent, and it's still a driving force today, as seen by the current, administration, and that administration moving aggressively in removing any environmental protection law, from the Arctic, you know, to all, you know, Bears Ears. You know, I mean, there's several different examples that we can have on that. But when we talk about environmental racism, there's always been a war on, you know, on black and brown people as well as poor people. And the other thing is, you know, this is a discussion that we're having today, but a lot of what we hear today was going on reservation lands well before it ever became something that, you know, became a topic that we're talking about now. What, you know, land and water rights was always an issue on reservation lands, you know, before it became a white problem in white communities. There was a wonderful panel earlier this morning that talked about Flint, Michigan, that talked about what was happening in West Virginia, the water issues that were happening there. And again, all of a sudden it became an urban problem and then it started getting media attention. But yet there were people dying of these issues well before it ever got any media attention at all. And you almost, again, have to ask, what was the agenda and motive? What's the gaslight with that? I was talking to a younger relative earlier today. We were talking about the lack of media attention. And we all know that it's really not a lack of media attention. It's just a form of governmental gaslighting. And anyways, that's my take on environmental racism.
I wanna kind of like say something that's kind of not gonna be too, I don't know, take to heart, as you would say, no? It's like, we look back as being a Native Americans, just as a caretaker, we've always been caretakers of this land, And when we see the people from the East come, we know, because the way, if you meet any Native American in your whole life, they will never turn you away. The only way they'll turn you away is that they're totally not unaware of their culture, of their ways of their belief. That they were taken out of their homeland and brought up in the white man setting, and they don't know nothing about their culture, then they'll turn you away. But if they have it, they'll welcome you. They'll bring you, and they'll clothe you, they'll feed you, they'll do all of these things. And that's what they see. And when I look at how we see these epidemics that are happening here in our world today, that makes people aware of what's happening, and the water epidemic that's happening, it's almost kind of like the opiate epidemic that's happening, right? Everybody here has people that are aware of them, or somebody that has those problems that's nationwide, it's on television, all over, Well, how did we get like that, First of all, the IHS, they experimented on us, another veteran over there, they experimented on us. And they said, oh, hey, it works, let's pass it out. And now they got all of these Native Americans and veterans all hooked on these things, and all in rural world America, here they are, dropping off left and right, committing suicide, dying. Here it is, 22 veterans every day die, And on the reservation, it's unbelievable. And now the water is getting like that, toxic like that too, That little stream that we went and drank at yesterday, how long is it gonna be before somebody decides to build an oil line through here and toxic that? Well, what are you guys gonna do? Are you gonna stand up? Because there's no natives here no more. The natives that were once here to Tecumseh, they're gone. And I know Guy lives here, and I know only one native that lives here beside her, and that's Irene up there, And what's going to happen, Are you guys all going to stand behind them and back them as relatives? I hope so, because that's your water. That's your life. And when we talk about it, it's not an environmental injustice. It's bringing back to what we need to do. Like, one of our ceremonies that we have is called Wiping of the Tears ceremony. And when we wipe the tears of our ceremonies, that means we wipe everything away. It means no more. We forget about what happened in the past, and we build on the future. Because that's what needs to be done. Like you said, this land that Antioch sits on is stolen land. Every year that they walk across graduation, that mound, whether it be a longhouse mound or a ceremonial mound, nobody knows for sure. But that's desecration. What do you think? You wouldn't let us allow you to walk across your mounds, Native Americans, and have ceremonies on it, right? So, by repatronizing our people and having a wiping of the tears ceremony and making that clear for these people here to allow this to happen, because Tecumseh was a great chief. He was also not just a great chief, he was a warrior. He helped with the French and American Revolution. he helped fight. So you guys wouldn't be French, really. I always tell people that, I say, you know, I always think we should have been let them win, because at least that way we would have been the world's known as what they say, the French is the language of love, right? Now, you know any other culture that has a kiss named after them? The French kiss, right? Mary Mother kiss. You know, that's what, you know. Should have let them win, you know, that way. You know, if you have America kiss you, they kiss you on the ass, right? Anyway, that's, you know, we look at these things and, you know, we need to get back to these things, you know. We need to work as together as relatives, you know. Because that's just who we are, you know. I was talking to my relatives yesterday. We were all sitting around talking about numbers. And I kind of did this in my head, figuring it out last night, because it kind of got to me, right? So I said, well, when it's my turn to end, or when I feel like I'm not talking anymore, I'm going to talk all my relatives in the audience. You know, by the natures of God, law, natural law, I'm your 32nd cousin, 30 times taken out. And that's the law of it. Because I did the mathematics of it, and that's what it came out to be. So all of you are my 32nd cousins, 30 times taken out. So if we all did a DNA test, it would all match up somewhere along the line. And that's where the Lakota say, home, we talk, we all say, we're all relatives, we're all one people. So with that, I will say, I'm done, or I'll hit you to a little my relatives, I'll let someone else speak.
I don't know how, I forgot what I was going to say, but I was thinking about French kissing and all kinds of weird stuff. Completely went off topic there. You know, when you talk about environmental racism, of course now Flint is one of the first things that comes up, and you don't need to look any further than, you know, less than 200 miles north of here to see what an example of environmental racism is. The other thing being is, again, it has to do with the water, with the lead in the water. And if you go out west, one of the issues that they had with the uranium mines and the mining companies out there, and they still have, is the fact that these mining companies weren't bound by environmental impact statements or Clean Water Acts. They're exempt from them. So you have some places on some reservations out west where the average life expectancy of a male is 49 years old. 49 years old, 3.5 times infant mortality rate, birth defects that are skyrocketing. This is in my time. This has happened in my lifetime, that this is what they have done to the water, and they did it on the reservations and in the area where there were people of color who lived. And then in 1919, around there, what they did is they said, we're not going to be able to create any new reservations. So even though we're taking the land and we're taking the mineral and the oil and the gas rights from the land, and we're polluting it, we are not going to allow them to move someplace else. They have to stay in that spot. That's environmental racism. That's genocide. We're still dealing with it today. People say, what can we do to help you? What can we do? You can't do anything. It's already happened to us. We are the remaining 2% that are left. We're here to warn you of what's going to happen to you if you don't take care of the Ohio River. Because if you think Ohio isn't a part of this, you need to Google it, find out what's going on, because the pipelines that they're going to try and build through here, the legislation that they're trying to pass in the state of Ohio, it was Senate Bill 250. I think it's 33 now, which is going to make protesting a critical infrastructure, which, by the way, they made oil pipelines at critical infrastructure. If this passes, protesting a critical infrastructure will be a felony. Helping someone protest a critical infrastructure will become a felony. Writing a sign for somebody who's protesting a critical infrastructure will be a felony. They try to make it so you can't fly a drone over a critical infrastructure because they saw what happened in Standing Rock. They saw how we protested. They saw how we got on social media to show what they were doing, to show that they were lying about what was happening there. And now they're trying to make those laws and pass those laws in the state of Ohio so that that won't happen here, because there are dozens of pipelines that they're trying to bring through Ohio right now. They're trying to relax the environmental laws on the Ohio River right now. And they're holding public hearings. They're letting us know about them last minute so no one can show up. And Alec is writing the legislation, and it's not some conspiracy theory. Look it up. Alec has written the legislation for the pipelines to be introduced in the states where they're going to be putting these infrastructures on. And if you own land in the state of Ohio and they use eminent domain and you want to fight them on that, or you want to protest them taking your land, that will be a felony too. And if you think that this is science fiction 1984 stuff, it's not. It's happening. We are here to warn you. Protect your water. Protect your rights. Protect who you are. My mother, both my mothers, and my father died from illnesses that they shouldn't have had, that they got from living where they lived, from doing what they did. You know, I'm scared to death because I have relatives who are dying from stuff that they shouldn't have, you know? All they did was be born into an area that they, you know, with poor health care and contaminated water. So that environmental racism isn't just on the reservation. It isn't just in Flint. It's become a socioeconomic problem. And if we don't stand up, and if the young people don't stand up and do something about it, it's going to happen to you. Both, I think.
I just want to make one more point, because my relatives over here were awesome in bringing out some great points, and it made me think of a couple things. If we're looking up at this map right here, which is awesome, again, I want you to look at the west coast, the California area. And for those of you that don't know, from the California-Mexico border all the way to the Oregon border is about 997 miles. It's about a 16-hour drive. Now, over the weekend, I had to go to North Carolina, and that was about a 7-hour drive from here to North Carolina. So I can't, I don't know, for those of you that have not been out to California and driven that distance from, San Diego all the way to Oregon, it's quite a drive. It's a big state. But one thing you need to know is that there are no reservations on that coast. From Oregon, from California-Oregon border all the way down to the California-Mexican border, there are no reservations. Why is that? Because it's prime real estate land. You cannot buy anything on that coast for under $1 million. I mean, and think about it. You got San Diego, you got Mission Viejo, you got Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Francisco. This is prime real estate. So if we're talking about environmental racism, you also kind of have to look at how it's affected Native people throughout colonization, and how that also works with, people losing land base. People that had village sites, sacred sites, now had to move because they couldn't even afford to live there, let alone they had to move. They were forced out because of the prime real estate land there. So again, it's money, people being expendable. And then again, you need to think about all the different oil leaks, all the different things that there were 5 big oil spills, especially around the Southern California area, that there were 400,000 gallons of crude oil, all the marine life, all the animals that were lost, and then again, how does that fit into people's diets? So again, when we're talking about how does this work in and how we're all related, each one of these coastal people, these California Native people, they were caretakers of their oceanic, relatives as well. And they saw that, again, that networking relationship. So environmental racism, when you think about that, you have to think about it historically and how that is woven to even now in Native people, First Nation people, trying to keep their language, their culture, and keep their spirituality intact. But I just wanted to make that key point.
Nina, do you have a comment about environmental racism?
Yeah. So, I guess over the past year or so, I was part of a group called the Indigenous Youth Ceremonial Mentoring Society here in Twin Cities. And one of the things that we've looked at as a group is something called the Doctrine of Discovery and the papal bulls of the 1500s, which is the root of a lot of colonization and this so-called term environmental racism. It leads back all the way to when they first landed here and when they were writing into law. And this, for those that don't know, the Doctrine of Discovery and the papal bulls are decrees that were written by the Catholic Church, by the Pope of that time, basically saying that all and any lands uninhabited by Christian people are subject to be stolen, and those people, those beings who live on those lands can be subjected to slavery, can be killed on behalf of the Catholic Church and enslaved, whatever, converted. And that we look at that and how the Doctrine of Discovery is rooted into our policy here in the United States. It's rooted into the Declaration of Independence. It's rooted into our law. When they go in, they're able to cite those sources. I mean, it was cited as not even 10 years ago against our people for land seizure, for eminent domain, saying that we don't even have ownership of our land, that we are just occupants of land that were taken by the Catholic Church, and they're still able to cite it. It's still able to be used in a U.S. court of law. And like I said, when we want to talk about how things affect us today, we need to look at the source of these things. We need to look at why we're dealing with these, why our reservations are hurting, why these poor communities, where's the root, where is the beginnings of our hurt, of our trauma? Why is our people suffering? It's because these old things have gone unaddressed. And so I encourage all of you and the audience and all to do some research on the Doctrine of Discovery and how it affects Indigenous peoples. Because if we look at our historical trauma, a lot of what we deal with comes from these old decrees. And just going off, I guess, our group was fortunate enough to go and meet with the Vatican about the Doctrine of Discovery. So we traveled to Rome, Italy, and we're still doing work on that. And we're educating our communities, educating the young people that these things, they need to be addressed. That we want to talk about pipelines, we want to talk about mining, but we need to understand why those are able to be built and why those are able to be built in black and brown communities that are harming our people. Thank you. I just do.
Thank you.
Can I say something before?
I have one comment about the history of California. When I was here doing my undergrad at Antioch, I took a independent study with Robert Fogarty, and the title was The History of the Native People of California. And at one time there were over 500 unique tribes with 500 unique languages that lived on the lands that are now called California. So that's something to marinate on a little bit there. So.
I wanted to let you guys know when they're talking about land issues, before Standing Rock happened, before the DAPO program, all that came about, our tribal government allowed the United States government, it was called the buyback land program, where they buy back the land from the Native Americans and fractionations of what, if somebody owns land and your family owns land and you fractionate it down because if so many of you in there, they give you so many fractions of land back. So a lot of people wanted to sell their land, the fractionations back. And so I got curious to why does the government want to do this? Why are they offering to buy back land that's fractionated down? And they said, oh, we're going to give it to the tribe. And that was a lie right there too, because they weren't gonna give it back to the tribe. Now, you gotta remember, when the United States government took our land from us and they held it in trust, that land is held in trust. That means we do not never have ownership of it. We will never be like anybody else. Like I was talking to my brother and them yesterday. I was like, it took me 16 years to get 10 acres of my land to turn and take it out of trust so I can get a home built from the VA. By the time that all happens, I'll be dead, but, you know, what the heck? I tried. Well, I kinda got the land back, but you see what I'm saying is, the buyback program was not just to buy land back from the tribe, but it's to buy land, to say, like, you ever play Monopoly, right? Who wins? The banker, right? Who's the banker? Always the winner. The winner ends up with all the property, you know? And so this is what is happening, is she's buying back the land, and nobody's getting nothing out of it but them. And we was wondering why my cousin was getting, he was getting almost twice as much money for his land, and it was underwater. And I was like, doesn't it make you think, you know, that something's happening here? So I started going to the casinos where they were selling their lands. They have prairie nights up in North Dakota and Grand River at ours. Well, when that happened, I got kicked out of the casinos I'm still kicked out. Can't go back because I protested. The tribe kicked me out. My own tribe kicked me out of my own casinos. And so it's like, okay, why? Why did you guys do this? You know? And when we found out that our keynote speaker for the DAPO was David Archambault, our tribal chairman at that time. He was one of the keynote speakers, and when we put that out there and posted it, he jumped off the bandwagon right away, you know? And a lot of this protest, you know, they didn't want that to happen. And people started going, the young people from Mount Bala, from where we're from, these young women, they stood up and they started doing what they had to do. And when we started looking at what's really happening with all the land, and they started going down the line of all the lands along the water down Missouri, all the little Lakota lands through South Dakota, all the way down, you know, that have land along that water. They too started the buyback program. People were buying and selling their land. Now the Indians, if the government wants it, comes in here and says, hey, sorry guys, you bought the land that no longer exists. And that's why I believe they put blood quantums on us. No, there's a black man right there, right? We know he's black because he's black, right? Well, let's say, I say, hey, show me your black card. I want to see if you're really a black man. You got a black man card? We're all laughing because it's funny because he doesn't, right? But you ask me, I'm an Indian, right? I whip out my ID. There's my Indian card. Tell you how much blood Indian I am. It's a pedigree card. Because you know what that's for? When it gets below half, they're going to say, hey, we made treaties with full-blooded Indians. You guys ain't full-bloods no more. So, black native, Neil, no good. So how do we work this? People are saying, how do we work this? Because like, some tribes marry into other tribes, they're full blood. You go and get an application. On the application it says Native American. It doesn't say how much blood you have. It says you want to know how much Native American is. So we recognize all Native American blood. We fight fire with fire. And all of our tribes have to start working together to do this. Become one, become unity again. Say, hey, we recognize your blood quantum. I'm from Standing Rock, and it took me almost 4 years for them to recognize Cheyenne River's blood quantum. And we're supposed to be the Chekin Shakowee. We're supposed to be all Lakotas. No? And then they recognized my mom's blood. She's full blood, my dad's full blood, so I'm finally a full-blooded Lakota again. But for a long time, they're all just a half-breed. You know, we just gotta start recognizing these Native American bloods. What I mean by that, that's like I said, when I went down south to Mexico to help those people, they're Native Americans too. Right along the line, all the way down. That's how we knew that they were coming up through Tijuana. It wasn't like, oh, you guys planted. No, it's in our DNA. You see that? line that goes up on the side, just like you said, all the way down. That was a trade route at one time. It was all the way into South America. That was a trade route. And that's in our DNA. That's nothing. So we knew. I mean, that's a young man here and another man. You know, and he fought for it. We only had $100 now. And the bear, I said, hey, we gotta go on faith. We gotta go on our faith alone. He take care of us. He did. He got us down there, took care of us. That's why we're here today. Because he has a message. Has to make each and every one of us recognize our relatives. Not just as people, but as water. Because as water is life. Without life, none of us can be here. And so when they're talking about you guys have to stand up and fight for water rights that are here, it's not just this state that made it like that. Arizona has that too. If you protest, you're going to prison. You stand up against him, you're going to prison. They don't want you to be standing up for who you are anymore. They're drag you away, throw you in jail. That's because you have to stand up for who you are and not for the water rights. The oil, we don't need oil. There's somebody that's maybe right here in our audience here. There's probably one of our grandchildren that's going to make a vehicle that can run on water. And they're going to say, hey, what happened to the water? Shit, we used it all up on that damn oil, remember? No. But there's still out there, we don't even need to do it no more. Because there's greedy people out there in the world that want that to come first. And we well, I can't speak for everybody, but I know most of us up here, all the way down, we come from poor families. We don't even know what it is like to be rich, you know? My family all graduated from Harvard and stuff, but we were never rich. They were educated, they lucked out, and they become something in their life. With me, I'm not an educator, I never graduated. The only thing I graduated from was high school, college, and the Marine Corps. School of hard knocks, right? And so, with this in mind, I want you guys to know that, it's up to you guys to change these laws here, Because we're not citizens here. We're not residents here. We're here to help. And so be it if they say, hey, that law passed, we'll come. We'll help protest. We'll do what we have to. Because that's what we're here for, is this water. This water is very sacred water here. Very sacred. You guys ever get the chance, if you're deep here, go across it. Take a drink of that water. Like my son said, taste that rock. Then you'll know what water is all about. Oh my God, you lost
it. Something that's striking to me, again, and that can never be voiced enough, is this idea that these injustices are tied to capital, the accrual of resources. Our identities are tied to these things. I mean, have you heard of the one drop rule? That type of thing, where if you have one drop of African blood, you're black. On the other hand, when you're Native, we're clinging desperately to our identities and trying to prove that we are Native enough, carrying our cards. And if you really take a deeper look at that, you see that we were valued for separate things. One of us was valued for labor, and therefore it made more sense to categorize as many of those people in that category as possible. Where on the other hand, we were valued for our land. And when you want to take that land, it makes sense to limit the number of people who can lay claim to that land, right? Gosh, our panel is we are just heading right towards the end here. I think it is a good opportunity for us to start doing a question and answer with the audience. We have some questions. We're going to have to keep stack, and then we do have some questions on the YouTube feed. So, oh, you're gonna run mics.
I was just wondering if you would address, if you would maybe talk about the murdered and missing Indigenous women and how violence against women is violence against Mother Earth.
I think that as we had all brought up earlier, that the ocean has always been seen as a mother and life giver. Mother Earth has been seen that way as well, and we as women are very connected to that. So when we talk about its violation and its assault and its devalue, its disrespect, it's clearly what has been happening with Indigenous women since this country was colonized. And the issue of murder of missing Indigenous women isn't something new. Again, this has happened since the beginning of the colonial period. I mean, like when it first, when these settlers first came to this land. It's finally, I believe, getting some more reference and airtime because more and more women have demanded that. I was actually surprised to see an article with CNN, addressing that as well. So I think that as we were talking about it earlier at lunch, we were seeing that there's a direct correlation, not only against the sexual assault of women in general, but specifically Indigenous women. There's a direct correlation with what is happening with the ocean and with the Mother Earth. And again, if you look at it, it's all about big money and the patriarchy, the misogynistic culture of money, capitalism, and imperialism that has not been part of our Indigenous communities. I believe Indigenous communities have always, most of them were matriarchal, and most of them upheld the power and life-giving aspect, but also the protection that women are. I mean, we've heard from several people on this panel saying that men's responsibility protectors, but we also heard from the lovely young lady that's been on the panel too, identifying more and more women identifying themselves as protectors as well, because women have always protected their children and their communities. We are intrinsically connected to the past, present, and future. We as women carry that community and the social movement forward many times because sometimes our men were not available to do that in the past, and that's been a present issue. And so we as women carry our future forward, and again, as you can hear from all of our panelists, that the need to protect the water is something that we do not only for this present time, but definitely for the future. Oftentimes, 7 times over the future, 7 times into the future generations. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I do believe that there's definitely a correlation with murdered missing Indigenous women and what is currently happening with the water issue, and what's happening to Mother Earth.
Just really quick, I'll give you statistics. 5,070 some odd missing and murdered Indigenous women in 2016 alone. Man camps, 300% domestic abuse has occurred in areas where man camps pop up. You don't know what man camps are, look it up. It has to do with oil pipelines. 1976 Supreme Court ruling that tribal entities don't have jurisdiction over non-native people, so the prosecution rate out of thousands and thousands and thousands of cases that come up against non-native people where they have hurt, abused, or murdered an Indigenous woman, only 157 of them have been addressed, and out of that, even less have been prosecuted. Up to 70% of all human trafficking occurs with Native women. And if there's events that are coming out, there's information that's coming out, but definitely look into it. It's horrible, what's happening with the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And I wish we had so much more time just to talk about that one issue.
Thank you for all of those statistics. I wanted to add to that we are targeted. We are currently targeted on the dark web. There are men who look at Native women and they know that they can get away with stealing us, murdering us, raping us, and destroying our future. And we as Native women have stood up and said no more. And we need your voices as well. We need you to recognize that this is a time where we are under attack. In 2014, President Obama passed a law that said that people who commit crimes on reservations against Native people can be prosecuted by their local police, and Donald Trump overturned that law. And so we're vulnerable more than ever before.
Interestingly enough, when we talk about the violations that happen with these pipeline leaks and the oil spills and all of that, there's hardly ever been any criminal charges. There might be some fines, again, putting money on and value regarding life, right? But hardly ever accountability. Money always trumps accountability, right? So if we look at that as a metaphor with murdered missing Indigenous women, there's hardly ever any accountability, right? So again, to me, that's a metaphor and a direct connection with how this is treated over here is how women are treated as well.
I quickly wanted to see if Nina had a response to this or a comment.
Yeah, so being myself a young Native Indigenous woman who wears their beadwork proudly, who has long hair, every single day I go outside and I wonder if it's going to be me. If when I stand up in front of a crowd of people, if I'm going to be taken. Because I have family members, I have my friends. That we have to live with that reality every single day, that if we go outside, that we are automatically targeted for being Native women. That 1 in 3 of us may go missing or murdered. And that every single one of us knows somebody. We have family members, our friends that deal with these same exact problems. That there are relatives on my reservation, young girls the age of 11, 12, that their bodies have been found. And so yes, this is, like I said, a very, very real reality we face every single day, whether it be pipelines, whether it be in urban settings, in rural communities, that this is something we face. We have to go outside and wake up every single day wondering if it's today going to be our day, if it's going to be us on that news article, if at all, if our police report's going to be looked at. That's a very real thing we face. And so I pray every single day for my sisters, my mothers, my grandmothers, and hope that they won't have to wake up and hear that I've been taken, that I've been stolen, and that they'll find my body down somewhere. It makes me very emotional to think, because a lot of communities face the same thing, and that it hurts that my daughters and my granddaughters. So I work every single day to make sure that their great grandma won't become a statistic, that I won't fall into that cycle, and that I will be more than my stereotypes, than my statistics, that they deserve more than that. They have to walk outside and have that constant worry. That's why I fight so hard. That's why I'm so passionate, because I refuse to be scared of those. I rise above it. I won't let that bring me down, because I know for a fact that my great-great-great-great-grandmother fought just as hard as I am. And there's something that I heard in this work, that we're not defeated until the hearts of our women are on the ground. And last time I checked, that's very much not true, because there are women leaders. I am among so many beautiful women leaders that are standing up because they refuse to become a statistic. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Chad Collins. My family is long-claimed Blackfoot heritage. It's interesting, though, you mentioned the blood quantum rule, the one-drop rule. Virginia had a eugenics program that actually targeted my family. And it's almost impossible at this point for me to prove that I'm Native American, which is interesting because as a Native American, to qualify for special treatment in an employment program, you have to prove it. And it's not a racial classification, it's a political classification. Well, currently I'm enrolled in the University of Oklahoma through their Indigenous law program. And so I've been studying things like, you mentioned the doctrine, our caller mentioned the Doctrine of Discovery and what that means with how we deal with tribal law. And there's this thing that we've been studying. It's this idea that American Indian law is liberally interpreted in the favor of the Native American tribe. That is an understanding that that people in the legal field try to have. But in my research, reading Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States of America, and reading various other texts, it just, and like you all said, it's like genocide. It doesn't seem like it's liberally interpreted in the favor of the American Indian. And my father passed away when he was 22 years old. He was very young, and he had a heart arrhythmia, and he lived here. I was born here in Dayton. And I've been reading all these studies that heart arrhythmias are associated with carbon emissions in our atmosphere. And Ohio is one of the worst states in the union to have carbon emissions. So it's like all these things are just hitting me at once, and I'm like, I honestly had a mental breakdown, because I didn't know what to do with all this information that I've been gathering. So I don't know, I wanted to get your, part of me wants to just, be the man and join the military and go off and fight because I'm so pissed off for something. I don't even know what I'm pissed off at. But you mentioned that you mentioned you're a veteran, and I see you have a hat on that says you're a veteran. What did you fight for? What made you want to go off and fight for this government that is, just dragged us through the mud and dirt?
No.
How me doc you up here. First of all, when you say this Indians get special treatment, there's no special treatment. And when you're talking about the law, we're supposed to have government-to-government entities. And all of the laws that you read, since you're in the Native American Indian law, it's supposed to say CFR rulings, right?
So, I'm sorry, say that again?
CFR rulings, right? That's what it says on it, right? And anybody that's unfamiliar with the laws, CFR stands for Congressional Federal Rulings. Now, when it says that, that means we don't never have to bow to a state, because Congressional Federal Rulings, federal, state. But the state wants to dictate to us how to live, and we're on federal limits. So the state is like this in any state that we live in. Like we live in South Dakota, our casinos have to get, make patents with the states to govern their gaming commissions. Which, how is that? When we don't have entities with them. We have entities with the tribe. It's supposed to be government to government relations, just like Las Vegas. Las Vegas don't have to worry about nothing, so why should we? But then again, that opens up the gate to a whole new crime rate. And again, that's when we need to understand that we, and the law say that when a white man does bad things on our land, he's supposed to be prosecuted by a white man. When an Indian does bad things, an Indian's supposed to be prosecuted. But yet we're still prosecuted by a white jury, a white judge, and a white prosecutor. That happens all the time.
I wanted
But
to,
you fighting about what you're saying about us being in the military? I went there because I was like you, I was pissed off. I wanted to go kill. Too bad we didn't fight the Russians, right? I'd still be in the court. No. But no, I went. The reason why I went, my grandfather went. My grandfather fought in World War I and World War II. My dad fought in Korea. I had 3 brothers that fought in Vietnam. And myself, and my son. Now today I got word my grandson is getting shipped out to Syria. So it continues. And it's not because we want to fight for this country, because this country is ours. It's stolen, but it's still ours. You know, it's like, you know, like you said, you know, why would you go and fight? It should be your obligation to, because you're a man. There's women that step up to that program and they go in there. There's women that's in the military to this day. Now, when I was in Marine Corps, we used to call them WMs, but now they just call them Marines. And WM standing for a woman Marine, and they changed it just to all Marines. Because they gave them that same entitlement, because they went out there and died too. But that's what we have to look at. Am I going to protect my country, or am I just going to be a part of what goes on with it? Regardless of how it is, because we all have that right to vote. We all have that right to make that action different. That's why we're sitting here as this panel, to get to each and every one of us to say, hey, let's make this a different world. And it's our vote. The reason why the president number 45 is in there, because nobody went out to vote. He got in here because nobody gave a shit. You know, and that's the truth of it. Nobody went out there to vote. It was like, okay, the lesser of the two evils, a woman president or a rich man. Let's do. Nobody gave a shit. You know, I went out and I voted for Hillary. I thought I'm sure I voted for Hillary. You know? And then the reason why I voted for Hillary is the lesser of the two evils. And that's the truth. At least I went out there and voted.
really quick, I wanted to answer your question really quick. With my relative here, part of what he's saying is that when you go to, when I was in other countries and the policies of other countries when I was in the military, you know, the U.S., they pay their military to fight. They are a paid force. I didn't join the military because of the paycheck. This is all I have. Everyone here, with the exception of a couple of people, you have another country to go to. This is my country. This is my country. So that's why it had nothing to do with the government. It had nothing to do with policies. This is all I have, the same way in Afghanistan or Iraq or Central America. This is it. We don't get to go someplace else. We don't have land and, you know, rights in Europe someplace. And the food, by the way, is much better in the military than it was back home. Okay. Real quick.
Yeah, really good author to look at since you're looking into, you know, since you're part of a law school and all of that. Steve Newcomb, he's an author. He's Shawnee and Lenape. He's also, he created the Indigenous Law Institute. He wrote a book called Pagans in the Promised Land, and it's critical analysis of Indian law, U.S. federal law and policy, and he also goes into deep critical analysis of Doctrine of Discovery. But you can find them on YouTube. And there's other people that go into discussion of Doctrine of Discovery. But I read Pagans in the Promised Land, and it really, I was interested in going into Indian law as well, and not no more, not after reading his book, because, you know, I just kind of feel that, well, I'll let you read the book. Yeah.
It's a very confusing field, I will say that. I mean, it's just back and forth. You know, like I said,
we can go on with this all day, but I got a question for you.
Sure.
Why?
Why what?
I mean, you know, it's like, and that's one of the things is this, is that I've been in Ohio since 1981. And one of the things that even now, as I go out and I talk to people, there's 577 federally recognized tribes and hundreds of state recognized tribes. But here in Ohio, we have a real big problem. And that problem is there's a shitload of wannabes. All these people who want to be Indian. And I'm like, why? When you begin to look at history, when you begin to look at everything relating to just that label, that name, people always ask me, they say, are you Indian? And I say, no. Oh, you're American Indian? No. Oh, you're Native American? No. Well, I'm sorry, you know, it's like we live in this time of political correctness. But you know, one of the things is this, is that I have my truth. I know who the hell I am. And even when I look at you, and it's like, do I see one of my own? No. Would I ever think of you as one of my own? No. Why? Because I know my experience is nowhere near your experience. And it's that experience because, see, I was talking about these number of recognized tribes, but one of the things that you have to take into consideration, this society with which we live in. Because not only do we have all of these recognized nations, but we also have indoctrinated, because there's a number of individuals within those nations who are indoctrinated. There's a number of them who have been enculturated. There's a number of them who have been conformed. And there's a number of them have been assimilated. And to understand all of that, Corinne was telling you about a book. Excellent book. But what perspective is that coming from? Because you see, all of that is not who I am. That's not who I am. Where we come from, Waukwalla, South Dakota. I come from a time where all of those dynamics of this society, they weren't a part of my experience. They weren't a part of that. It just is. You know, that's one of the things is this, is that from 1992, I've been going back home because people have asked me questions. So I go home and I explain it. And my mother left the reservation. She came here to Ohio. And she had all of these little Instamatic cameras. Because she couldn't believe it that there were white people in Ohio that wanted to be Indian. Who thought that this was really something cool. And I said, Mama, it started back in the 60s with the hippies. I even brought her to Yellow Springs. And I said, this mentality still exists today. And I explained to her, and I was talking with her, because you see, one of the things is this, is that, and I tell this a lot to people, and I said, if you really want to fully understand the dynamics and look at it objectively, and you want to see how these things unfold, you want to know about racism? Go to Yellow Springs, Ohio. Go there. And you will see it. It's that blatant. I settled in Dayton, Ohio in 1981. Why? Because that city is so segregated. And it's very defined. I had a conversation yesterday with a lady and a gentleman. I said, we don't recognize that we live in a black and white world. And what is that black and white? Blackness, it's void. It's nothing. White, it's empty. There's nothing pure, there's nothing sacred about it. But when you pull them apart, you see all these colors. It's those colors coming together. One is the absence of, and one is the unification of all. That's where we need to go. You heard a number of conversations here that took place today. And there is terminology that is used. And there's validation, because so many of us today, we look for that validation. But you know, there's something today that's happening, and it's really, I was amazed because I just came from Cincinnati at the Freedom Center. And they were talking about doing this exhibit in January about women, human trafficking, sex slavery. That very issue, murdered and missing Indigenous women. Because you see, they recognized that it's just not us. It's a social ill of this country. And while so many of us are pointing fingers, and that's where I get upset. I get upset because everybody's pointing fingers. There's enough blame and guilt to go around. This country was founded on something. And it was brought here in a little book, and it's called The Original Sin. And that's where we get into blaming, into guilt. Oh, let me give you the statistics. Let me tell you how many, what this church or what this group did, or these people over here, what they did. This is 2019. We have the opportunity to do something for our grandchildren. And while you're out there trying to pick a label, there's a number of children who are trying to get rid of those labels. When you're out there trying to pick a fight and stand on somebody's soapbox, you know, get out there and start doing something. Get out there and do something. How many of you in here are willing to do something? How many of you in here are willing to get arrested for what you believe in? And you give me your name and number, because I'm doing some shit on Saturday night. I'm going to make something happen. And I'm not going to tell you what it is right now. But it's going to happen. Because I tell you what, I'm tired of just talking about it. Okay? Because it's like you all got to open your eyes. And that's one reason why. Why? You got to ask yourself that. I can't answer that for you, but you got to ask why. Why? Because you have an opportunity. You look like that white male Republican. You have an opportunity to make some changes that every damn one of us in here can benefit from. Do it.
So, we are running a little behind. We affectionately call it running on Indian time. If you do need to leave or have time constraints, we're not going to be bothered. We will stick around and take a couple more questions, however.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm Eastern Band Cherokee. I have been having conversations like this with my friends for a while and with elders, and I get really emotional. But it seems like the issues that we've talked about today are the issues we always talk about, and they're all connected. It's an ecological, humanitarian, and spiritual crisis. And I have the hardest time having these conversations with people that aren't my friends and aren't my family, because I feel like there is a disconnect between how I have learned to perceive the world in terms of just that way. Like, as you said, it just is. Like, is it that capitalism has, ripped people's humanity and spirituality away from them? Like, how do I educate people on how to live a cohesive life and, have those, critical conversations? Because it seems like there's no bridge. I don't know how to bridge this to help people understand. They want to say, it's this issue, it's that issue, it's that issue. And it's no, this is how you are supposed to live your life. It's all one thing. And I don't know if that's making any sense, but I don't know how to, and I feel like I have to educate people, as a way-passing person. That's very important to me. People are more comfortable having difficult conversations with me. So I want to know if you have any advice about how to have conversations when the fundamental ethical morality isn't shared.
Isn't shared? You do share. And I mean, one of the things is this, let me explain something to y'all. I am Honchpapa Lakota. But one of the things that happens is this, is that, you know, I go back to Standing Rock sometimes, and when I go back to Standing Rock, you know, some of my friends and some of my relatives, they'll come up and they say, damn, you sound just like a white guy. And I say, I know, I'm getting really good at it. And it's important, and that's important. You know why that's important? Is because when these people come to me, I can sit down and I can deal with them and I can talk with them. I can talk with them because, you see, we talk about, you know, you hear these people who are out there running, kind of bumping into walls and stuff, talking about feminism, and you got one sitting here saying warrior, and one over here that says warrior. But, you know, those linguistically, we need to begin to think about those. Because, you see, those are all part of a world that isn't real. That isn't real. And why is that? And I mean, you know, because first and foremost, when you know yourself, when you know who you are, then you can begin to relate. When I grew up, I wasn't a Sioux. It was later on I found out about Honchpapa, and they told me what the Honchpapa means. And because, you know, that's the end of the horn. But one of the things is this, is that end of that horn, is that we are part of the Buffalo Nation. So the tip of that horn. And one of the things that happens is this, is that when there's a threat or there's something that isn't right, then it is the young males who will make a circle, and within that circle they will put the young, the sick, and the elderly. And those young males will stand on the outside, and they bow their heads and show you the tip of their horn. Why? Because with the Lakota people, that's our responsibility. Compassion, bravery, fortitude, truth. All of those things, there's 7 of them in all. That's what those young bulls are doing. And that's the end of that horn. That's the responsibility. Now, when I look at other nations and I look at people, that's just like, you know, even today, you know, and it was like, I remember a long, long time ago when I was first taking catechism, because they don't do that anymore. I don't even know if people remember catechism, but I took catechism. And so when the teacher was reading to us, and it was talking about Adam and Eve and how the snake gave the apple, and Eve took the apple, and how it was the woman who introduced original sin. And I sat there and I said, well, you know, Adam had a choice. It was his fault as well. And they sent me home. You see, but what I'm saying to you is this, is that my grandma, she used to say, we all have this, we speak the same language, it just sounds different. And it's important that you know those. And it's important that you know that. Because like even I was talking about the word warrior and feminism and all these other words, I was like, even at that, you know, is I come out here to Yellow Springs and there's people who say, oh, did you smudge? You got a smudge. You know, how many people in here smudge, right? Y'all can raise your hands too. All right. And what is smudge? Smudge is an English word. It's Old English. And what does it mean? It means to exterminate. And what are you exterminating? Negativity. But you see, amongst the Lakotas, we say azelia, which is to preserve. Because you see, in the Lakota language, we don't have a word for sin, where that concept doesn't exist. We don't have a word for the devil. We don't have a word for Satan.
Hell doesn't exist. Neither does heaven. Those words don't exist. Those concepts don't exist. We don't even have a word for hate. And guess what else? We don't have a word for love. Because there's a duality. If you have a word for love, you gotta have a word for hate. Can you imagine living in a world where you can't verbally express that? I hate you? Imagine that. Because you see, our children are born that way. We are the ones who teach our children how to hate. We are the ones who teach our children from right and wrong. It is us. And we get that from here. And where do we get all of this? It's from all out here. But we have to need to begin to recognize all of this out here so that we in here can make the changes for our children. So it's important that you know those things, understand them. I go to church. People get I say, oh, you one of those kind of Indians. And I'm like, you're darn right. I've read the Bible 3 times. I've read the Quran. I read all of these scriptures because I want to know how they think. How am I going to deal with these people? How am I going to deal with that? I went down to Cincinnati, and there was these people down there, and I said, where did you get this? And they started telling me, and I said, oh, okay. So I took their Bible, and then I opened it up to Matthew, and I said, okay. I said, now Jesus, now just remember, we just had Easter. So Jesus says to go into town, and you will find an ass, to untie that ass and bring him to me. And if anyone stops you, tell them I have need. So what does that mean? That if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, you have the right to steal whatever it is that you want. And you want to ask about the Doctrine of Discovery? Where did that bullshit begin? It began right there in their scriptures. Now understand that and know that. And you can relate. You can relate those things. I don't have a problem reading those books. I don't have a problem with that. And I converse with these people. Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on my door. And I said, come on in. You know? I said, let's talk. I said, you want to pray first? And and it's like, and so now, they come and knock on my door, and they'll say, is your son home? And I say, no. And they say, okay, tell him we stopped by. But it's like, and the thing of it is, because I encourage my children to do the same thing, to learn. I hope I answered it, and I hope I didn't run over my time, but I know I ran over my time. But I feel that it need to be said, because a lot of us, we don't do that anymore. To understand the degree of how far you've acculturated, how far you've assimilated, the degree of conformity. Understand those things. Understand them to the point that you yourself you can recognize who you are. Because you see, all of these things in life today comes from within here. When we talk about the world, I know my world. I don't know your world, but I know mine. And we can talk about it.
Thank you, Guy. I want to add a really quick comment because I get that too. I am also white passing, and so people feel the need to talk to me a lot about identity and those lines and what it means to use this young man's word, qualify. My aunties told me that tribes claim us, we don't claim tribes. So I feel for people who are searching for their identity, who have been stolen people, who have been put into the foster system, and who are looking for their relatives. But when I think about all our relations and who we are as people, I think about our ancestors, and I think about honoring our traditions. And like Guy said, look at ourselves. Look at the way that we walk with the world. Look to your aunties, and if you don't have an auntie, you find one.
Really quickly, I just wanted to say that I think that everyone has a gift, and we all have a responsibility and an opportunity to be involved in whatever way we can. And locally, there's so many issues. There was a panel earlier today that talked about, that you can get involved in so many different ways just on a local level. Anything from, public curriculum in public schools, or what is going on environmentally, because we know, I think what we all agree with here on the panel is that environmentally is also human rights. There's no compartmentalization on that, So no matter who you are, no matter where you're, the very fact that you're here is the beginning of something, is the beginning of that discussion, and for some people maybe, maybe some of the material that was brought out here will give them a few days to digest and talk some more. But I believe that education is always the key, how we educate others and how we are educated. We always have to be educated. We have to critically think whatever is being brought to the table. But I don't think it's as challenging as what it might seem to be. I think there's so many opportunities to educate and be educated on.
Really quick to address your question, very quick. I apologize because we were so over time. Do you know what historical trauma is? Okay. Inversely, there's something that if somebody does not have that experience and their ancestors don't have that experience and their ancestors' ancestors don't have that experience, you can't explain historical trauma to them any more than you can explain our experience. And so it's not that they don't want to get it. It's not that they don't have the intelligence to get it. It's that unless you experience it, unless you have that, that's like you trying to explain to me what it's like to be a woman. You could talk my ear off all day. I'm not going to understand. And so sometimes people just have to accept that and say, we are here, we are here as allies, and we may not understand your experience, but we understand that your experience is valid.
Okay. Any question? Yeah, this should be a quick one, but what would the panel recommend, or rather demand, from our political leadership at this point? For my part, I'm over the past few days I've been getting a campaign ready and filing with the Federal Election Commission, and for this district, House of Representatives, Congress, and I've got some crazy ideas on how to maybe get people to wake up and want to see change. But the average Joe is doing enough. Everyone's protesting, and I don't see anything getting done. So, what would you have of me? What would you like to see of me if, or rather when, I get elected?
I think I wanted to answer that.
I'm going to pass this on to my relative. No, honestly, good luck with your campaign. And we just have such a horrible experience with politicians and campaign promises and land treaties and treaties. Usually, I want to go outside and make sure my car's still there. I didn't know yet, actually. No, seriously, the best thing you can do is just find those people who represent your constituency, whether it's in whatever community it is, LGBT, the African American community, the Native community, the migrant community. Find those people and try not to speak for them. Give them the opportunity to speak, and listen to them. What we did in Cincinnati with abolishing Columbus Day, Cincinnati came to us. They came to us and said, what do you see this looking like? What would you do? And they facilitated it for us, but they didn't do it. And that's what I suggest to you is if you want to help out, find those groups and find out, what you can do to facilitate them.
Well,
I appreciate.
Actually, in Cincinnati, there's a whole different story to that.
Sure.
But what he said, well,
Corinne?
Do I go now?
Oh, I just wanted to quickly say thank you for your question, and I appreciate your sensitivity to that. But honestly, I've had that question asked, and then when that person was elected, never followed through. And that really disappointed me, but it didn't surprise me. And one of the things, going back to environmental racism, several times I saw tribal leaders go to environmental meetings and not even given the mic. And yet they're coming from sovereign nations, whether they were federally recognized or independent nations / state recognized, they were not even given that respect. Sierra Club was, Surfrider Club was, all of these clubs, all of these businesses, especially when the oil spill happened, these restaurants that were affected by that, they had the mic first, but these tribal leaders were not. And I think that what they fail to remember is that these politicians and the Coastal Commission meetings they're happening on stolen tribal lands. This is all Indian land. It doesn't have to be a reservation to be considered Indian land. So not even given that respect and that sensitivity of you have tribal leaders coming to you, wanting to advise and be part of and be seen as co-partners, we're not even given consideration on that. So I think that my suggestion to you would be to always consider that first and foremost, before your stockholders or your potential, votees. So I really do appreciate your question, and I don't know if that answered it correctly, but that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I'm coming to these type of events, I'd like to hear perspective straight from
Hello? Hi. This will be our final question.
Yeah. All right, I think it's a reflection, and wrapped in it somewhere is a question. You all referenced Cincinnati several times, and thank you, first of all, for being here. Thank you for the work you're leading. As I sit here, the thing I'm thinking about is how do we begin to work across our intersectionality and our oneness. And, I believe when we've tried to do that around God, it fails us, right? We worship God differently, we see God differently. When we try to do it around morality, it doesn't exist. But I think the tangible thing of this thing called water and just how it impacts us. I'm from Philadelphia originally. My grandmother, she grew up on stolen land that was then stolen from her, Frostburg, Maryland. They put a university where the first black community had been in that town. And so the Ohio River has had a major significance to me because of slavery and my family that has migrated and what that river meant to cross the river, be here, be free. And in recent years, what I've learned, however, is that maybe the only river in all of the US where the white man's rights, where normally you would split a river and the rights down the middle, with the Ohio River, it extends all the way to the Ohio side. And the reason being is that the slaves that were doing work and being moved on the ships needed to be kept enslaved, right? And so I think as we tell the story of water and how we all past, present, and future connect to water, I see a great deal of power in uniting us as we begin to talk about our water stories, our water connections, and just the richness of it. And I think the more we allow the fragmentation, the segmentation, the nomenclature to divide what is a human tribe of people and an ethos that we know in us to be right, I think when we can have something that connects that, we win. And so I want to know, how do I serve? I'm not getting locked up for you because I am a black man in America. And once I get locked up, right? So, and I'm being honest because I do a lot of organizing, I do a lot of action, but I won't get arrested. And it's something I wrestle with, that fear to be arrested and to carry that American stigma. is something I got to get over at some point. But I do want to know, how do we unite and how do we take action together?
Well,
Yeah.
first of all, stop thinking like a white guy.
I know.
Right?
Easier said than done.
And I mean, and that's one of the things is that, and like even you use terminology like intersectionality.
Yeah.
That is like one of the biggest bullshit lines that exist today. And I mean, and that's why, but now we share, but there's a lot of things that, we can go and relate on. But as far as intersexuality, I mean, no, Intersectionality, I mean, it's like, I got all these words because I'm like formulating them in my head.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things is that's, like even, with the rest of this panel. Now, I was married to a black woman, and I have children that are black. I have grandchildren. And one of the hardest days I ever had, and I sat down this morning and I talked with this lady about it. Because even today, I still, it's like, I listen to my children's mother. I listen to my son's mother talk about what he needs to do when he's stopped by the police. Now, we're getting ready to do World Peace and Prayer Day. And what peace means to me is that my daughters, I have 4 daughters, and my daughters don't have to explain to their sons and share that story. That's peace. And there's these things that we share that, we need to go and tell our stories to one another. Because there's a great deal up there, and one of the biggest problems in this country today is that so many of us, we have forgotten to listen. Somebody asked me one time, they said, where did you go to school at? I didn't. There's a lot of things that I've learned on my own. For a great number of years, I advocated. I traveled, spoke at Ivy League schools, Big Ten schools, Pac-10. I traveled and I advocated for the study of white people. Because, in my mind at that time, it hadn't been done. Then I went to Sinclair Community College and I took a sociology course. And I was like, damn, it's already been done. Because these sociology professors were telling everybody who's normal, this is the norm, these are the deviants. They were defining all of these categories and putting people into these categories. And I began to realize, and I started, and I looked at how society itself. But I can understand that. I can understand that fear. I can understand that because, you see, I've been there. But, I don't have a problem with that. But you know what? I'd gladly do it. And it's nothing to be proud about. I mean, and that's what I tell my children. It's nothing to be proud about. But, it's like, it has to be done. And once they shut those cameras off, and once everybody shuts everything off, then I'm going to tell you all what I got planned. Okay? All right. I hope I answered your question.
You did.
All right.
Before you guys go, before we leave, like you said, this Lakota's here, and the lady down there, Miss Banks, Lakota. One of the things that we say in our Lakota way is, am I a good relative? Am I a good relative? Did I come here in a good way to be good to you? And do what you have to ask me? The relatives here that asked me to come, I've come because I was asked. And a lot of people say, well, you got money to come. It didn't matter. I would never took the money anyway. I come because as the way us men are, we're brought up this way. When you become a pipe carrier, you go up on a hill and you hum lecha, and you do these things, and you like God, my Tahashi, my cousin, my blood cousin, come from a good chief, a good warrior chief, you know. And so if I was to give him something and ask him to do it, because he's my relative, he's older than me, he would take it and think about it, and if he wants to, he'll help me. Doesn't mean he has to. But as a younger relatives, like me, and he comes to ask me because I have to give him that respect because he's older than me, I'll help him. Regardless of what it is. As long as he apologies me, that means he gives me something to do this with. And it might just be a good pat on the back and say, hey, I'll share this deed with you, or whatever to do it. And our relative, Arlo, he asked us to do these things together. He's going to be getting the World Priest and Prayer Day, and I'm going to be going out and gathering the bundle keepers. And we all work together because we're all family. This is our nephew here. He's the youngest. Then my son, and they're coming, we're teaching to live in today's world. So you're asking, how can we do this? Be a good relative. Teach. Show. Live. And ask yourself every day when you wake up, let me be that good relative. Doesn't that say that in the Bible too? Love thy neighbor like I love thyself. You know? That's being a good relative, isn't it? Like you said, that's the book that he talked about. So this isn't about the way we ask these things. Let me be a good relative to each and every one of you when we leave here. Let my words carry on. Let me try to help you. And if you ever need any help, you know her, or get over her. Our
I just wanted to quickly address your question. Your question was, how can we all find a common ground? And I think people forget that, you know, if we strip away our skins, we are comprised relatively around 80% water. Our bodies are comprised of approximately 80% water. And so, you know, so not only do we need to keep our water system safe, but that helps us keep our bodies safe. And that also keeps our agriculture safe, you know, which needs healthy water. And again, people don't necessarily eat healthy. I mean, you go to a farmer's market and so many people don't know what to do with the vegetables they see. So I think teaching healthy eating is also an important part of that connection to water as well. So water has a lot of different tentacles. You know, it's not just the water systems or the wetlands or the oceans or the marshes, but it's also in regards to our own bodies. That again, and there's health crises going on. There's diabetes. There's heart disease. There's so many ways we can come together on the issue of water if we brainstorm its connection to all the different aspects of society. Aside from, you know, wherever we may come from, you know, or whatever our economic factors are with that.
All right.
Wait,
that's
hello?
going to wrap up our presentation, our panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Hello. It's
very
Nina. I want to say something.
Thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you, Nina, for being on the line.
Wait, I have more to say.
What? Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Nina.
Can I just add on? Because I feel like I kind of got like skipped.
Yeah.
Everyone's
okay.
No one's left.
So, I'm extremely humbled to be able to sit here and listen to those on the panel and the questions being answered. It's a lot of the things that they're talking about are things that I think about every single day. And it's very reassuring to be able to hear it come from people who are older than me, and me being a young person. I'm only 19 years old. When one of the speakers was saying how he never went to school, a lot of the questions that I get asked is, are you going to go to college? And me being out of high school a couple of years ago, I get that almost every time I talk. They say, where did you learn to speak Where did you get your strength from? How are you able to speak in front of people and educate them? And I owe it all to my family, my ancestors. I say that this is just me speaking. I could never have done it when I was younger. But coming more into myself, my identity, this is who I am. I've taken up my responsibility as a young Lakota woman, that this is what I should be doing. This is the work that Creator has put me here to do. And to answer that question that young person asked about talking to and educating other people, I run into that all the time being a young person. I go and speak to churches, to people, to groups of other young people, to older people, and you find that conflict a lot, whether it's they want to listen or they're not understanding where you're coming from. And I always think to myself, why aren't they listening to me? Why is it like I'm talking to a wall? It's because, like you said, we have that different experiences. We have those understandings that they experience something that I'll never be able to understand. And I have to understand that it's the other way around. And so it's finding that common ground and understanding and recognizing our individuality as people and our uniqueness as different groups, but also finding that we hold those uniquenesses, that they go hand in hand, that you're unique as you and I'm unique as me. So let's come together. And so I always say that we are going to birth the changed generation, that it's upon us as the ones who are going to create that next generation, that what change can I instill into my children that will be able to help push a better and more beautiful future. And I guess to really wrap it up, and for all those young people in the audience, I don't know what really the age group is, and just coming as a young person, I've only been able to speak in front of a group of people for going on 2 or 3 years now. I never would have expected to be able to learn and see the things that I have. And a lot of the learning has come from me sitting in ceremony, from me being able to understand when they say these Lakota words, I'm able to hear and listen. And so it all takes that step, whether you realize you're going through it or not, that you are able to do great and beautiful things, that I never realized that I could speak in front of people, that I have the power to educate. I have the power to invoke change until I realized my capability as a young person, that I don't have this much time, that I have a unique voice. I bring a unique perspective to things because I am fresh into the world. And that I, as a young person, need to be stepping up and speaking for the young people because there are a lot who are lost, whether it's due to this historical trauma that their grandparents and our parents aren't there for us. And so it's up to us, those couple few. I've managed to meet so many other beautiful young people who are standing up and saying a lot of the same things I am. And so it's finding that power within yourself, finding that you are able as a human being to invoke change for your children. And so it's empowering, it's enlightening, and it's educating, and being able to be proud of who you are and say that I am able to say proudly in front of whoever it is, Malakota Mia, I come from a strong bloodline, and I know that my people are warriors, and I know that we'll continue on. And I just wanted to say that and let you know that us young people are fighting. Us young people care, and we will never stop fighting for our people. As long as we're still here walking the lands of our ancestors, that we will never die. I say Wopila Tonka to all those, and I want to recognize all my relations.
Thank you so much. There is a community meal being served in South Gym. Just a quick announcement at 5 o'clock.
I have brought some manuman, and you can share that. Manuman is a wild rice from Minnesota, from my reservation, White Earth, and it is the only sovereign seed on the planet. It had sovereignty about a month and a half ago, and it is our staple food, and only people who are members of White Earth Nation, like myself, can harvest it. I want you to taste it. It's pipeline for now, because the third line of the Keystone Pipeline is threatening to go through our sacred Manuman fields. So please join us at community dinner and taste some pipeline-free food.